योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिमानतोऽस्मि। लये सम्बोधयेच्चित्तं विक्षिप्तं शमयेत् पुनः सकाशायं विजानीयात् समप्राप्तं न चालयेत्. Om. Just as an information, in our 4:30 Veda class, I started teaching the Bhartrihari's Niti Shataka. That is one after the other. We will study the whole of the Niti Shataka of Bhartrihari. So I just completed 2 verses in that. Which the reason I mentioned that is because for today's study of the Yoga Sutra, that background of Niti Shataka will be very helpful to appreciate why we should do Ashtanga Yoga. So that is it. It's like a prerequisite course for getting into the Ashtanga Yoga part. So anyway, we'll look at that. So in our last class, we did a recap of our study of the second chapter, right from the first sutra to the 27th sutras. All the 27 sutras we recapped. That was very important because now and then we have got to stop, pause and see where our study is going. And therefore I thought it was worthwhile to recap the sutras studied so far. Also because in the second chapter it establishes the philosophical basis for Yoga Shastra altogether. So an important term was used. If you look at all of them, one of the most important terms used is Viveka Khyatihi. So why coin that word Viveka Khyati? What is the difference between Viveka and Viveka Khyati? Why Viveka by itself is not adequate in pursuit of our yogic life? If you go to Vedanta, then they say that Viveka is very important. And the way they talk about Viveka in Vedanta is Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka. Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka. That is, you need to have a discrimination of what is eternal, what is permanent, and what is impermanent. So that was essential in the study of the Vedanta, where we are pursuing actually Atmajnana. Further, the preparation is Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka is required. Then Iha Mutra Phala Bhoga Viragaha. That means one must be impervious and indifferent to the enjoyment of the all the pleasures here and hereafter. Like, for example, the desire to go to heaven after death, etc. Iha mitra phala bhoga viraga. So that means Viveka and Vairagya is spoken of in every branch of study. And so also in Yoga Sutra. We have also seen earlier in the first chapter itself about Viveka, about Vairagya. And then there he also has pointed out we must have Abhyasa and Vairagya, practice and Vairagya. But so in order to emphasize that the Viveka spoken of in Yoga Shastra is something not limited to just the discrimination of what is permanent and what is not permanent, Patanjali Maharshi introduces the terminology called Viveka Khyati. So Viveka by itself, the meaning is to discern, to discernment, the recognition between the Sat and Asat, that is the real and the unreal. And then between truth and fiction, that also Viveka we require. Of course, we need to have the the discrimination between Atma and Anatma. Atma is Purusha in Yoga Shastra and Anatma is Prakriti. So, Purusha Prakriti discernment. He also uses the word Drishya and Drashta, the seer and the seen discernment. So, the discernment can be the seer and the seen, Drashta and the Drishya. It can be between Purusha and Prakriti. It can be between the real and the unreal, Sat and Asat. All of these things are actually Viveka. Now, why should we get that discrimination? The reason is, in fact, they are eternally separate. In no circumstances can there be any commonality between this. There is no unreality in reality. And there is no reality in unreality. There is no Atma in Anatma. Likewise, there is no Anatma in Atma. But they are mixed. Why did they get mixed? Because of Samyoga. Because they came into together. And therefore, first and foremost, the project is that we have to cultivate, even if it is merely an intellectual appreciation, that there is a distinct difference and they can never be the same. That has got to be understood absolutely perfectly. So this brings a very important question. How is it possible for humans to achieve Viveka? Why should we even talk about Viveka as far as human beings are concerned? Because don't you think we can absolutely appreciate intellectually that Atma and Anatma are different? Can we not appreciate very, very, without any doubt whatsoever, Nitya and Anitya, Atma and Anatma? But still, why are we not in that state where I can clearly see the difference? It is because no matter how much a human being works on it, still he is part of the animal kingdom. We should not forget that. We are still a prani. One magnificent thing that God has given to us, a great gift God has given to us, is this human being can become divine. Whereas other ordinary animals cannot become divine unless they take birth as a human being. This is what the famous Shastra Vakya which says, Ahara Nidra Bhaya Maithunani. Ahara, taking food, Nidra, rest and recuperation, Bhaya, fear, Maithunani, to procreate, Samanyam. It is common to Samanyam etat. This is common to both Pashubhihi Naranam, to the human beings as well as to the animals. But a special blessing is given for the human beings, and that is this buddhi, intellect. Buddhir tesham adhiko visheshaha. A special grace for the human life by giving us the intellect. So whoever does not have the intellect, or whoever is not using the intellect for developing this viveka, buddhya vihinaha, pashubhis samanaha, he is no different than an animal. Hence, what does this, or how do we understand this? Any person or any human being, first and foremost project is to develop the buddhi. And how do we say that I have developed a buddhi? It is only through viveka. Just a few minutes back, I was teaching one shloka from Niti Shataka, which is also appropriate here. Ajnaha sukhamaradhya. A person who is completely ignorant, but who is humble enough to say, I want to know, it is easy to teach him. Ajnaha Sukhamaradhya. That person makes to the teacher and the Shastra his buddhi available. Sukhataram aradhyate visheshajnaha. But there is also a very learned person, highly educated, highly learned. For him, it is again easy to teach. Because it is possible the person has gone through a gamut of knowledge of whatever branch, but a little bit is not there. We have always pursued only pleasure and happiness and money in our life. So nobody has told me about Atma. Nobody has told me about Anatma. And here a Sadguru will come to me and then says, hey, you are not the body, you are not the mind. And if I am Visheshajna, a person of knowledge mixed with humility, Sukhataram Aradhyate. It is easier to teach that person. But the third kind of person, who is not learned, and then who is a fool, and he is adamant. What can you do with such a person? Ajnas sukamaradhyah sukhataramadhyate visheshajnah. For such a person, Brahmapi naram naranjayati. Even Chaturmukha Brahma himself cannot teach a person who is a fool. Jnana lava durvidagdha, who does not have even a grain of knowledge. Lava means it is the size of a rice grain. Even that much of knowledge is not there, but the person is very adamant. And then he says he doesn't know anything but says, I know all. For such a person, buddhi is not available. And therefore he becomes buddhya vihinaha pashubhis samanaha. So therefore, among the three kinds of people in the population, a whole set of population who are murkhas can never become yogis. But Patanjali cannot disenfranchise them either. And therefore he has to develop the techniques of saying, even if the person is a murkha, there is some hope by following the Ashtanga Yoga. He has to establish. So the first question is, how is it possible to achieve viveka? For a viveka, for a human being, there is already a gift of nature that he has got buddhi. So the first recognition is, I have got buddhi, and because I have got buddhi, I can get discrimination, and I want to get discrimination. For that sake, you see, Patanjali introduced Kriya Yoga, and he said, what is the hallmark of a person who has no buddhi? It is avidya. And it is a klesha. Until such time Patanjali came around and told me that avidya is a klesha, I never considered avidya to be a problem. It is only now I am knowing, because of the grace of this great sage, that avidya is indeed a problem, and secondly, it is my problem. Avidya is not something I have inherited because of the Creator. Chaturmukha Brahma did not create me with avidya, but I cultivated avidya. And if I have accumulated dust and dirt in my house, I have to take the broom and then clean it out, isn't it? Otherwise, no dirt can come into the house by itself. I brought it, or I allowed it to come, isn't it? Therefore, it is possible for humans to achieve vivekaha. One important conclusion. Yes, we have viveka, The next question is, do we act on it? Is the next question. Because it is not enough if we have viveka, but we should also exercise the discretion viveka. Do we in fact exercise viveka? The answer is yes. Because we definitely can discern arthakama. I definitely can discriminate between edible food and inedible things. To that extent, I already have viveka. But what about dharma, adharma viveka? That is the next question. How much of ability I have to cultivate dharma, dharma? So for this, our scriptures say, this viveka, dharma, dharma viveka, is not necessarily present. In fact, unless it is cultivated, dharma, dharma viveka, nitya, anitya viveka, prakriti, purusha discernment viveka will not come at all unless it is cultivated. Because the only extent of discrimination I have is with regard to artha and kama, because they serve my selfish interest. Swartha. Therefore, whatever viveka I have, that is, I can discriminate between edible food and inedible thing on the table. I can experience what kind of conduct will increase my artha and kama. To that extent, I have got viveka. Now, this viveka has to be taken to the next higher level. And therefore, Patanjali Maharshi now includes a practice of Kriya Yoga which leads to Viveka Khyati. Tapaswadhyaya Eshwara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga is introduced. Arthakama, we don't need to be introduced, or we already got the skill from elsewhere. But for the sake of getting the yogic state, Viveka Khyati is required, because for a yogic state, mere Viveka is inadequate and it must be taken to the next higher level of Viveka Khyati. So, how can we get Viveka Khyati? Tapas, Swadhyaya, study of the scriptures such as Yoga Shastra, study of the scriptures such as Vedanta is required. How should we acquire that? It should be acquired with enormous amount of commitment. Unless there is focus and commitment, there is no hope for us to become peaceful at all. We do all the puja, we may do all the tirtha yatras, whatever we do, equanimity of mind is possible only when we learn all these things with great commitment. In the 9th century, there was a great learned scholar, an Advaitin. His name was Vachaspati Mishra. Very, very big name in Advaitic tradition of authors. He was came a little after Adi Shankara. Shankara is probably around 7th century. He was late 8th and 9th century. Vachaspati Mishra. He was in Mithila, that is the present day, it is the border of India and Nepal. Even now you can actually see this city of Mithila, which also was the capital of Janaka Maharaja, where Sita was there, and that's where Rama and Sita wedding takes place. So in this Mithila he was there, and he took up a project, and the project was, I want to write a commentary on the Brahma Sutra Bhashya of Adi Shankara. Adi Shankara wrote a bhashya on Brahma Sutras. It's called Sharirika Bhashya. And he wanted to write a commentary on that Sharirika Bhashya. So Vachaspati Mitra actually focuses immensely in that project. And it takes a little while. So then he was probably around 16, 17 years of age when he thought about this project. But at that point of time, his parents came and then said, you have got to get married. So it was an instruction by the parents, so he takes that as their desire. But he is still completely absorbed in his contemplation and study on the Brahma Sutras and the Bhashya of Adi Shankara. Then they bring a girl, and then he tells her, saying that my commitment is completely, he even doesn't look at her, he just puts his head down and say, my parents have brought you here, but this is my life's project. I have got to finish my commentary on Brahma Sutra Bhashya of Adi Shankara. That is the project that I have. Everything else is secondary for me. But this girl says, that is fine. I will marry you, and then I will enable your work. And the marriage takes place. Even in the marriage hall also, Vachaspati Mishra's mind is only in the Brahma Sutras and the Bhashya. He has not even looked at his bride. Marriage takes place. And Vachaspati Mishra continues his study and his writing. Miraculously, every day, a stack of the Tadapatras, where he has to write, the leaves, a stylus where he has to actually carve out, the ink, clean clothes, food, everything was readily available all the time. He feels hungry, just looks around, next to his table there is food. Morning he has got to do his anhika, hot water is ready, fresh clothes are ready, towels are ready. Everything is there. And then one day, he actually completed his commentary on the Brahma Sutra Bhashya. It was evening and the lamp was already lit and it was full of oil and it was burning brightly. And his work was over. He wrote the Mangala Shloka. And then in the light, in the illumination of that light, he looks up, there was a woman. And the legend has it. He says, Madam, who are you? And she says, I am your wife. And my name is Bhamati. Immediately, was it you who made sure that I had everything ready at hand? There was not a single day when I had to get up from my desk to get a fresh stack of the leaves to write. Or there was not a single day when a stylus was not available. Was it you who made all these things for me? She says, yes. Then Vachaspati Mishra says, I have not given a name to my commentary yet. I don't want posterity to say, Vachaspati Mishra, take the name of Vachaspati Mishra for my commentary. It is going to be called Bhamati hereafter. So he gives the name Bhamati, a very, very extraordinary commentary on Brahma Sutras studied to this day. Advaita study is incomplete without studying Bhamati of Vachaspati Mishra. Now you can see what an amount of focus and concentration is required If you have to produce a work which will be studied even 12 centuries later, whose sacrifice is greater here? Is the sacrifice of Vachaswati Mishra not at all engaging in a family life greater? In spite of having married an extraordinary person, not having a normal family life, but still she actually supports her husband's project, which is greater? And why did they do? Why did they choose this lifestyle? That is taking Viveka to the next higher level. And then he goes back and examines the world. And then he tells to his wife. And later on, of course, he also writes another work called Tattva Kaumadi. Tattva means reality. Kaumadi means the moonlight, shining of the moonlight on Tattva. And he says, what an extraordinary woman you are. Because usually look at the gradation. What happens? For a person, he wants to study Shastra. So we take a Shastra, a difficult Shastra such as Yoga Shastra. You are already seeing that. A perfunctory study of Yoga Sutras, which you will see in all popular textbooks, is not difficult to study, isn't it? But when we go into the depth of the Shastra, we know how challenging it is. So Shastra, what happens is, as we are studying Shastra, you come across some beautiful poetry, a wonderful dance. Then that Kavya pushes Shastra back. And then, so you are studying literature, which is making you a very happy person, then somebody will come and sing beautifully. You are sitting in a concert, an extraordinary musician is there. When you are listening to the music, sometimes we may say this is this raga or that raga. Sometimes. That too, if you have a particular kind of company, you may just share this particular raga. Otherwise, are you not completely absorbed in the music? So what does music do? Music pushes back our interest in Kavya also. Then comes the attraction of a woman. As soon as there is the attraction of a woman, music goes to the background, Kavya goes to the background, Shastra is forgotten, isn't it? But when a person is very, very hungry, extremely hungry, then even the woman goes to the background. What an insight into the human mind. Kavyena hanyate shastram. Tajja gitena hanyate. Gitam cha stri prasangena. Stri prasangaha bubhukshaya. So what is the relevance of this? Unless our mind is bent upon getting the Viveka Khyati, very easily, the moment a compelling situation comes, mind slips. That cascading effect, Vachaswati Mishra writes in Tattva Kaumadi, saying, you are so dedicated to Shastra Abhyasa, then comes Kavya, then comes Gita, then comes a relationship, then comes hunger. Which means what? We have gone back to the animalistic roots. Hence, Patanjali Maharshi said, that viveka must be taken to the next higher level of viveka khyati. So let's come back to the question, what exactly is this viveka khyati? You've been talking about viveka khyati. What is the definition? Viveka we saw is discrimination. Khyati. Kya means knowledge. Kya means to get vision. So khyati is the seeing the wisdom of viveka. The vision of viveka is viveka khyati. So what does this viveka do? Viveka generates jnana, knowledge. Viveka is not mere discrimination. It must result in viveka janya jnana. Viveka janya jnana means the vision of otherness. It is also technically called as anyata khyati in Vedanta. Anyata khyati means what? There is Atma, there is Anatma. The knowledge which is a vision, my own vision, experienced vision, that this Atma is other than Anatma, Anatma is other than Atma. Eternal is other than temporary, temporary is other than eternal. This is called as Anyatha Jnana. Anyata Jnana, not Mahaprana, Anyata. Anyatha means wrong Jnana, it will become. So don't use the Mahaprana, Anyata Jnana. This is different from that. So when this Anyata Khyati or Viveka Khyati occurs, what Jnana emanates? The Jnana that emanates is Sarva Vishaya Jnana. That means at once, and instantaneously, a person gets the knowledge of all objects. Not sequentially or distinctly. At once he gets knowledge of all the objects. This is called as Sarva Vishaya Jnana. Then we can call this as omni-objective knowledge. So next thing that happens also is Sarvatha Vishaya Jnana. That is Sarva Vishaya Jnana, Sarvatha Vishaya Jnana. Sarvatha Vishaya Jnana means omnitemporal. What is the difference between omni-objective knowledge and omnitemporal knowledge? Omnitemporal knowledge means all the objects which are there present in front of me, perceptible by my five senses, is omnitemporal. I have a knowledge of all of this. I have a knowledge of even those objects which are not immediately present before me. Either because of desha, outside the purview of this space, or kala. It may be in the past, it might come into the future. That's called Sarvatha Vishaya. You will get the Sarvatha Vishaya Jnana also. And third quality of this is, it is akrama. Krama means sequential. Akrama means there is no sequential process of getting this knowledge. That means it is instantaneous. See, this is the special Viveka, because how do we acquire any knowledge? It is sequential. You start studying with arithmetic. Without learning arithmetic, you cannot understand algebra. Without knowing arithmetic and algebra, you cannot understand calculus. Isn't it? So what is your knowledge of calculus? Sequential. Kramabadha. But Viveka Khyati is not Kramabadha. Baddha means conditioned. It is not conditioned by a sequential way of learning. It is knowledge at once. Why am I talking about all these things? It is because Yoganganusthana, when a person has perfected all the aspects of Yoga Shastra, then the person will get Vibhuti, which we are going to see in the 3rd chapter. How can a person get the siddhis, such as a person can become absolutely light, Hanima, can become very heavy, Garima, like Hanuman. Ashtasiddhi Navanidhi Kedata. Ashtasiddhi. Ashtasiddhis are possible through Viveka Khyati and Yoga and Anusthana. So, Sarvatha Vishaya. In other words, the distinction between Viveka and Viveka Khyati is it is not a mere intellectual understanding. Mere intellectual understanding is Viveka. But when it becomes Viveka Khyati, that is called Samprajñāta Samadhi, which we studied in 1st chapter. And this is what what Patanjali Maharishi says, by following Yoganga, the Ashtanga Yoga, a person gets this Samprajñāta Samadhi, which is a synonym of Viveka Khyati, and that is what is dealt with from this sutra till the end, sutra number 42 to end. It's going to be studied. We have already studied about this in the 1st chapter, sutra 42 to the end of this Samprajñāta Samadhi. Everything that he has talked about in the 1st chapter is now he uses one single word, Viveka Khyati. So we have made a case that we have to leap from Viveka to Viveka Khyati. To jump from being an animal to a human being, Viveka is required. To jump from a human being to the divine, Viveka Khyati is required. We have achieved human life, and therefore we are endowed with buddhi. We cannot be stuck here, because if we are stuck here, the next iteration is falling down only. As Vachaspati Mishra beautifully said, from Shastra you will go to Kavya, you will go to Sangeeta, you will go to Stri, you will go to hunger. Unless the person actually uplifts with Viveka Khyati and becomes divine. This brings another very important philosophical question. Is man naturally moral or ethical? Is it natural for me to have morality and ethics? Or is it something to be cultivated? We can only say that human beings have a moral sense. That is all. It is not germane to a human being to be moral or ethical. But a person has got moral sense. This moral sense is called buddhi. Buddhirhi tesham adhiko visheshaha. An animal does not have any moral sense. There is no discrimination when it comes to ahara, nidra, bhaya, maithuna. No discrimination whatsoever. Anything that is available goes. But for a human being, because of the buddhi, he has got the moral sense. In other words, the necessary and sufficient conditions for ethical behavior is there in the buddhi. What are the 3 necessary and essential conditions for Viveka to become Viveka Khyati? Number 1, there is the ability to anticipate the outcome of our actions. That's one of the qualities of the human mind, isn't it? Ahalya, in fact, gets attracted and infatuated towards Indra. And Ahalya welcomes him. She very well knew that it is Indra. And after gratifying herself, go and see Ramayana. After gratifying herself, she urges Indra, please get out before Gautama Maharshi comes. If he comes, it is going to be very nasty. Why did she say that? Because of this human ability to anticipate the consequences of our actions. That means already one ability is there. Secondly, human beings have the ability to make value judgments. We can say that this is pleasant, this is unpleasant. This particular picture is good, this particular person is good and noble. We can do value judgments. And thirdly, we have the ability to choose among alternative courses of action. So 3 distinct qualities are there for the human mind. Number 1 is to anticipate the actions. All this is obvious, but in the study of Yoga Shastra, we have got to highlight all this. So these 3 qualities are there. The capacity for ethics, the necessary and sufficient condition for the capacity of ethics is an attribute of human nature. What is the importance of this? That means every single person can get Viveka Khyati. Every single human being, no matter who he is. This is the reason why Vedanta also says everybody can be liberated. Yoga Shastra says everybody can be liberated. No exception. And anyone who takes up this path is assured of liberation, because he is leveraging on the genetic conditioning itself. A human being knows Ritam, cosmic truth. A human being knows Satyam. That's why everybody wants to be others to be truthful. And Dharma is where the issue comes. Because Dharma is a practice. And who determines that practice? Culture determines practice. And therefore Patanjali Maharshi turns his attention in the whole of the Ashtanga Yoga to develop culture of the human population. Ramayana is written to develop the culture of human population by juxtaposing the right and the wrong. Mahabharata, you take any of the Shastras. Why should there be Shastra? It is only to point out to the reader, the student, that you already have Rita and Satya in you. That is your genetic conditioning. You have come across this. Dharma is something that you don't know. That is something you don't know how to use your intrinsic ability for liberation, and you don't know which kind of dharma has to be designed for the sake of getting liberation and discrimination. So that is why he uses the word Viveka Khyati. The reason why I am spending quite a bit of time on this definition of Viveka Khyati is because that once we understand Viveka Khyati, we have understood Yoga Shastra. So then, Patanjali has to bring about all this teaching, and now he has to actually teach us how to get to Viveka Khyati. Next question. Okay, I agree with you that I have to go from Viveka to Viveka Khyati. And that leads to Kaivalya, Moksha, Nirvana, liberation, call it by whatever name. So, what is this? It is overcoming dualities. And it is not just overcoming dualities, but it is transcending dualities. And now, what is the process? We know that adharma leads to papa, and papa leads to naraka. Now, let's look at the Puranic view. Similarly, dharma leads to punya, and punya leads to swarga. So, what is it I can do as far as the code of conduct is concerned? Either I do dharma or adharma. And dharma ends up in swarga, adharma ends up in naraka. It became duality again. Therefore, why are you talking about yoganga? Why are you talking about virtuous behavior? Because he's going to start with virtuous conduct. Why not just intellectually go from Viveka to Viveka Khyati and not bother about dharma, adharma, and not bother about my conduct? By getting Viveka Khyati, can I attain moksha? In other words, let's reformat the question. How can virtuous behavior, which is dharma resulting in punya and ending up in swarga, how can it lead to liberation? We're questioning the very fundamentals of why I should be a person of dharma. Dharma can lead to liberation only when virtuous conduct leads to greater goodness. What do I mean by greater goodness? Greater goodness is a person by virtual behavior avoids his future dukkha. We have already seen heyam dukkham anagatam. And secondly, virtuous behavior is so that it benefits others. Unless virtuous behavior benefits others in the society, I cannot get liberated. That is why you see in Ashtanga Yoga, it starts with Yama Niyama. It starts with Ahimsa Shauchamasteyam in relation to others. So therefore, this point was taken and to another level by the Buddhists. And that's how they said that there are three important necessities or the three principal paths that a bodhisattva, a person who is looking for liberation, should do. And number one, to cultivate the correct view. It is called as Samyak Drishti. And for Samyak Drishti, Shastra is essential. The second important thing is there must be a Vairagya or a renunciation. And the third is the wish to attain nirvana is the wish to benefit others. So we can also approach Viveka Khyati from the other way around also, as long as our life is dedicated to the benefit of others. And for that sake we are following the dharma and not with the interest of getting punya and swarga, then also Viveka Khyati arises. George Feurston, he took to the study of yoga and then he became quite a scholar in Yoga Shastra. He writes a very, very poignant sentence. We cannot be rogues and hope to grow spiritually. Beautiful statement. This also is a pointer for us that there are so many people who talk about spirituality, but inside they are rogues. How can they help us? So what is the path to this liberation? It is to go through morality rather than around morality. And hence, Yoga Shastra talks about profoundly caring for the welfare of others. A paradigm shift even in our way in which we serve others. If somebody accepts my service, I must think that person has done me a favor. Normally what happens is, I do service to somebody and expect that person to be thankful to me. It's the very reverse. This you will see whenever we give a dakshina to a brahmana, when we conduct a ritual, there is a mantra which says, that you came and performed this ritual for me, I am blessed. And this dakshina I am offering to you is not a compensation for the amount of grace you have granted for me. That is all. So this is already seen that as we will see in Sutra number 30, that welfare of the others. So with this background of bringing Viveka to Viveka Khyati, from the animal to the human being, Viveka is the process. From the human being to the yogi or the divine, Viveka Khyati is the process. And the alternative is scary. Because what is the alternative? We will go back into the animalistic realm. And therefore, with this, we enter into the Yoganga Sutra number 28. Yoga Tasya Saptada Prantabhumihi Prajna. That is, there are stages of becoming Prajna. From Prajna to come to Yoganga, understanding of Viveka Khyati is critical. Yoganganushthanat ashuddhikshaye jnanadiptihi aviveka khyate. Yoga anga. Anga means limbs. By means of anushtanat, by the practice of the yogangas, what happens? First, ashuddhikshaye. That is, all the impurities are destroyed, or at least weakened. Ashuddhikshaye jnanadiptihi. The radiance of knowledge happens. And where does it end? Aviveka khyate. It ends up in Viveka Khyati. Again, Viveka Khyati is again an extraordinary term that Patanjali Maharishi has used more than once in a sutra, which has to be Alpaksharam. What is Anushtana? Anushtana is a practice. There is a Shastra Vakya which says, Yatha Anushtanaha Tatha Siddhihi. With the fervor which we practice, correspondingly there is going to be success. If we study in the last moment for the examination, we will pass the examination. If we have studied for the examination from day one, you will probably get in first rank. Yatha anusthanaha tata siddhi. If this is true in everyday life, it is all the more true in our yogic life. So planned methodology, staying with the project, with knowledge to carry out the undertaking until the objective is got. Or in short, implementation is the meaning of anusthana. So what happens when the yogangas are actually followed two things happen, two effects happen. One is Ashuddhikshaya and the other is Jnana Deepti. Impurities will slowly start coming down and the radiance of knowledge will correspondingly increase. If you carefully notice, sunrise in the morning, you wake up and look at the eastern sky before the sunrise, that is when it is dark, how you will see as the sun comes into the horizon, slowly the light will go on increasing, the intensity of light will go on increasing. When the sun has come above the horizon, the whole place is beautifully lit. But that few minutes, as the sun is rising, don't you see lessening of the darkness and increasing of the light? This lessening of the darkness is Ashuddhikshaya. Increasing of the light in sunrise is Jnana Deepti. This is the reason why we do Sandhya Vandana at break of dawn. Because here my ajnana is slowly being burnt away by this great Gayatri mantra. So what does Anushtana do? Anushtana causes separation of impurities. Anushtana acts like a sieve. So Ashuddhi, all the impurities are actually sieved. And then, therefore, when it is sieving, the grain is falling down as you are sieving the grain. What is falling down? Pure grain is falling down. So there is also, as you are adding the impure grain and sieving it, it is pure grain is being collected at the bottom. So that means it happens simultaneously. As our impurities perish, the light of knowledge also increases. Just as when we are continuously doing acts of dharma, proportionately happiness increases. Please think about it. Every time you have done a charitable act, a certain resources, your resources have been given away, isn't it? A few things you are giving as dana. That to that extent your resources are depleted. But proportionately or disproportionately, your joy has increased. This is what is Jnana Deepti. In other words, as we are studying the successive sutras, our knowledge of Yoga Shastra is also growing. Namaskaram. Archana has come just now. So, Dirgha Sumangali Bhava. So there is an interesting concept in the Shastra called Karanatvam, and that means there is a cause which results in Karya. So what is this Karanatvam? Causation. It is the Anushtana or the practice. That is the causation. And what is this causation? There is a transformation of energy. Yoganga Anushtanat Ashuddhikshaye Jnanadiptihi avivekakyatehe. That means the energy that was there in Ashuddhi, in impurity, transforms itself into the energy of knowledge. It is not replacing impurity by purity. That is the surface meaning. But the internal meaning is there is a power in impurity. That power gets transferred to purity. Just as you remember when I was talking about Ragadvesha, I mentioned Raga, attachment and hatred, has an enormous power. But how do we use that energy of ragadvesha? By preeti and vishwasa. Love and confidence. Same energy. As intensely as you love, let it be transferred. As intensely as you are attached, let it be transferred into love. And when that happens, transformation of energy happens. That means even if one single moral impurity is removed in our life, one single, to that extent, the obstacle becomes less and less. This is what we called as antarayas, if you remember, in chapter 131. So this has to be read in simultaneously from 131. All the obstacles, say for example, obstacle of vyadhi, sickness. So what happens? As you go on taking medicine, the sickness will go on reducing and the comfort of good health goes on increasing, isn't it? Similarly, when one by one moral activities are included, yoganga is included, chitta prasada. Chitta prasada means pleasantness of the mind. In this context, please see chapter 1, sutra number 33. We talked about this. The chitta prasada will go on increasing. For example, when there is daurmanasya, there is some irritation, some bad feeling is there, which is an ashuddhi. When the yoganga anusthana of maitri or friendship is replaced, then jnana deepti shows as chitta prasada. So this is the reason why yoganga anusthana, ashtanga yoga has to be practiced. Patanjali Maharishi establishes the reason for taking up Ashtanga Yoga, and what Ashtanga Yoga is there will come in the next sutra, which we will take up in our next class. Thank you.